Ankerlid. We're going to talk through a new business idea that he's going to share with you. And let's get started, guys.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for having me, guys. Do you want me to kick off directly?
No, we'll
introducing ourselves like it's like we're pretending that you're not here for the first 5
so
seconds.
I'll say I'm Chris Justin. Ethan will say I'm Ethan Janney. This is why we do this. And he'll read a bio for you, and then he'll welcome you to the show. At that point, you can say, "Glad to be here."
There you go.
All right. Now people understand that we were live, though.
Yeah, exactly. So now you're seeing behind the scenes how the sausage gets made to the audience.
Yeah.
There.
So pop in, guys.
Yeah, we'll point to you when it's your turn to jump in.
Sure.
I'm Chris Justin.
And I'm Ethan Janney. And today we have Anders Ankerlid, CEO of A Good Company, a serial e-commerce entrepreneur and father of 3. He's worked in e-commerce for more than a decade, and he is a mindless consumption activist, meaning he is not promoting mindless consumption. I'm assuming against mindless consumption.
Yeah, Anders is not mindless.
Welcome to the show, Anders.
Thank you so much for having me today in a lovely evening here in Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah, you mentioned it's 9:30 p.m. over there right now. I appreciate you joining us in this evening hour, coming in from your run. Really excited to talk with you about this idea as someone who cares deeply about the environment. When I saw what you're doing with A Good Company, that really resonated with me, and I was excited at how successful you've been able to be with that company and how quickly you've been able to get that off the ground. We will have some time to talk a little bit about that at the end of the episode, and we'll certainly pull some lessons from your experience there throughout the discussion. But the point of our podcast is to talk through a completely new business idea or new business opportunity available to folks out there. So let's kick things off. Tell us about the idea that you would like our listeners to run with.
Yeah, sure. So at A Good Company, to start with first, we are thinking a lot about how we can change complex things and exchanging materials. And one of the major hurdles running an e-commerce company is obviously returns and when things go sour, which I think is a big chunk of running and grinding through running an e-commerce company. And I think if you have ever touched base on a e-commerce company, either as a consumer or as running it, you are fully aware of that returns is like one of the major hassles. And there's been some good innovations. I spotted a company called Happy Returns just the other week who set up like small kiosks where you don't have to throw things in like the cardboard boxes and so on. But I think the typical philosophy, if you let's say that you buy a pair of jeans and it doesn't fit, is that you have to put it back in a box, send it back, and typically it's the company that pays for that. And if you have that a few times, it's a loss. And on the other side, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, I saw a YouTube video when I was up a little too late about e-waste. And it was like 20 minutes, I don't recall the show, maybe it was for like the Guardian channel or something, that pronounced out a UN, like United Nations study about how much we produce of e-waste, of small electronics, and how complex it is to recycle it properly. And most of these items then ends up in landfill, like 90% ends up in landfill. Yeah. And they are quite bad for the environment. They are quite bad for landfill. And it actually lives a lot of people also close and related to landfills. And they can get these ugly metals in. So then I figured that maybe you can do something positive with these returns. And basically, while sending out the first item, just add in a small envelope or something similar. And I have no name for it, but let's call it a good e-waste or another good e-waste or whatever. And then people who has a lot of e-waste or like as we have back in our apartment, we have like a box full of cords, old things that doesn't work, and old cell phones, which we doesn't do anything positive with. And you can just bring them back, in the same package you're already about to send, so there wouldn't be a new sending things. And then it's properly collected in bulk, and then from there brought somewhere where you can actually, and this I read also in an Apple, like I think Apple put it out, how much value there actually are if you can handle the actually recycling. So it's about building up a circularity system of things that already exists. So that's the idea. And I'm sure it has 200 million complex things to solve, but it will be quite good to increase the ratio of this e-waste and maybe bring it up to, like, switch it from 90% just getting discarded today to maybe 90% getting recycled and get a second life.
Waste is definitely a complicated topic. I tried to start a business in the composting space many years ago in New York City, and yeah, all the small things that you didn't expect, that, and there's actually a lot of barriers in waste management, and there's also a lot of players who have various established advantages, So for example, in New York City, they had a law in place that you had to have a special license to collect waste. And that was a very expensive license because it was for the big waste collection companies, that would come around with the dump trucks and all that stuff. And you had all these kind of well-meaning people who they wanted to just do a compost pickup service on their bicycles, and they were being blocked by the government and maybe even by these other waste collection services. So they got to have the license. Well, it's completely off the charts to afford that if you're just going to ride your bicycle around.
I think it's actually the same here in at least in the Nordics where I'm having my home base. They do not, so we have, I would say, sort of a proper recycling system, and that always strikes me that we have a really like a functional recycling system. But even though that we have like the things of electronic waste is still like 60% here in the Nordics, even though that there's so the recycling system itself is so evolved and mature. But I think there's a law against that you cannot bring other people's waste to like the recycling. So you can only, there has been some disruptive players who offer themselves to basically, as you were saying, picking up by bikes or whatever, pick up a lot of people's waste, bring it there, and then they charge for that service. But that was, I think it's been shut down. But yeah, that's just politics, I guess. That could be complex. What do you think, Chris? Is it doable?
I love the idea. I love the intent behind it. Of course, the execution, I think, is the challenging piece here, which I'm excited to dive into together. How can this be a profitable venture for a company to bolt on this service?
Yeah, so I think there are two ways for that. I think if we start with why I believe that you can get customers, I think for the end consumer side, and this has always been my philosophy, if it's good for the end consumer, there's always a market. And I think it's a quite strong message for, let's take a big fashion brand who has a desire to be more eco-friendly, to jump on something like this and communicate it out to their consumers. And I think that consumers, they are getting a massive headache out of their space. They are fully aware of. I don't think that we are an abnormal family who has a box full of things that are e-waste in our apartment. I think everyone has that. So maybe that's like if these two boxes are ticked, I think the company itself can, and I think this is one of the problems with recycling itself. I actually, when I was a management consultant before, we had a lot of recycling companies as customers, and it's very complex to be good at fractions. You're either very good into, I don't know, metal or aluminum, or the other things just get sell through into other areas. But maybe there's a space where you can specialize into making e-waste. And I think the AirPod is the worst example. I have heard that it's like non-recyclable. But of course it is if you specialize it, and they produce a couple of million of these. So obviously there must be a lot of small valuable parts there, which I hope that you can sell back to the manufacturer, since I guess metal can be recycled forever since it's such a long period. So I hope that the company itself can turn into maybe a reseller of raw materials, fine-tuning recycling processes out of a specific niche. And hopefully if you can get, and maybe this is correlated to why e-waste is just like, I think it was like 50 million ton or something that was discarded a few years back, according to United Nations. And maybe it's so complex, since it takes a lot of different flavors. It's cords, it's cables, old phones, or batteries, or whatever it might be, that no one gets like turning into an expert. So I have no idea. I think it's just I think e-waste, that's the way I spotted it, that if there are things that are very harmful to the environment, it must be a way to progressively address it. And since it doesn't work out really, then my family, I guess, would have taken all of this box already, brought it to the recycling center, but it's been there and it's growing every year. So we are not doing anything with e-waste. And obviously the people that brings it back to recycling, it doesn't get recycled. And then either people are just throwing it in the bin and they hope for the better that someone will put it out, which obviously is not happening, or when they're actually turning it to the recycling centers, the recycling center cannot handle it properly, and then it ends up at landfills.
Yeah, you know what? I'm trying to imagine, of course, as a group, we probably have really no idea how this stuff can get processed, but maybe I think when we talk about steps to get involved, I think that that's something to look at. And oftentimes, at least as I looked at in terms of composting, you know, there's different ways that it gets done, and there's things that happen in the existing waste processing system that we aren't really aware of. Like in the United States, there's a lot of places where, well, a good example, New York City, they actually decided against having recycling bins in the New York City subway system. But on top of that, what they do is they have people who actually sort out recyclable materials from the waste. So it's turned into a thing where, no, you can't really expect people to throw the recyclable things in the right container. Where it happens, the process happens after people discard of it and they start sorting things out. Well, one idea, again, no expert in this, but I'm trying to think what makes taking all these electronic components, of course, they're valuable in the state that they're in because they've been assembled and put together, and you know, a transistor is different than its basic elements. But I'm wondering if maybe some of the solution with this is when you get the e-waste, it gets basically pulverized and then just re-separated out into basic, not looking for a transistor to reuse, but taking the mercury out, separating it out, and using that, you know, and distributing the various, you know, silicon or whatever, if there's a way to separate out the materials. Chris is the
that's
in the group. I don't know.
Yeah, I had chemical engineering background. I worked at an oil refinery for 6 years, so I have a lot of experience with separating streams and quantifying the value and all that. I also consulted briefly with a waste management company in the Philippines, as they were describing. They were gasifying the trash that they had coming in, and they knew what the composition of the trash was going to be. Ballpark, just in general, it's 12% plastic, and there's, you know, this much percent glass, and so they have that broken down. So this is a similar type of problem. It's just way more complex and way harder to separate out the pieces. So the action step that came to mind for me immediately is quantifying what the individual components would be worth. And you can pick some easy items to start with, right? Like your cord for your phone. That's comparatively compared to a laptop, it's far fewer parts, right? And how much, if you were to disassemble that and extract the most valuable materials from that, how much would that cord be worth? It can't be worth more than $30 because that's how much you're paying for the finished product. But that would give some sense of can this idea stand on its own, or will there need to be some additional socioeconomic incentives in order to bolster the waste stream value?
Yeah. Maybe there's a few other rev streams. Maybe you can charge a little bit from the consumer who gets a headache out of the way, since it's a related cost to do recycling. At least here, you have to drive a car or take a bike or spend a lot of time. And here you basically just have to give it away to someone else. I think what is the thing, this struck me, what is the thing that drug addicts like steal? Is that copper, or there is a material which is like things where
copper is very expensive?
Yeah. And I think that at least we have a core that we are selling mainly from, like, everything on the outside is recycled material. And I think I have cut a few of them, and I think there is like a copper line within it.
Right.
So there must be fractions in every. If we stay with cord for a little bit, there must be fractions there who obviously has a value in the raw material. And there must, I think our family at least have, 20 cables, which is not in use. So maybe if you only is starting with specializing in one of the things, maybe you can innovate a way where you can de-assembly and then sell the most valuable raw materials, and then obviously most of the cores has plastic on the outside, so then you can ensure that you do proper recycling of them.
To expand on what Chris said about how the original cords were $30, so as trash, it can't be worth $30. Made me think of how a lot of these things sort of actually end up having a negative value. And party that oftentimes has an interest here is the government or whoever is funding the trash removal. So again, City of New York, what I found out when I was researching the composting project is they spend millions of dollars a day just shipping their garbage off to other places, and other places make money by taking their garbage away. So
that's about to stop, right? I think a lot of countries has prohibited that we in the Western world needs to stop sending our garbage to the less.
I know China has stopped taking recyclables, which that has had the ripple effect in the U.S. of a lot of recycling here ending up in landfills because it still requires.
It's a strange thing to do, sending your things to another country on the other side of the world.
Yeah, and that's where I come back to this idea that there needs to be some perhaps socioeconomic incentive or government incentive, as Ethan is alluding to, in order to prop this up, because there are what's the word? It's uncounted externality, or maybe it's just externality is. It's not being accounted for, but 50 years down the line, we're going to pay the price because we have all these metals in our drinking water, right?
Well, there's multiple prices, but there is, the thing that I'm highlighting is there's an immediate price.
Sure.
Not always obvious, but if you can get in alignment with the government and say, hey, I've got a company, and what the company is going to do, it's going to remove, 10% or 20%, whatever, of your waste via, I'm going to get the electronics waste out of it. And you don't even sell it based on the pollution factor and all. You can say, oh yeah, and these are just added benefits. We're going to, we're going to help obviate these other things down the line. But just to say, hey, pound for pound, you should save, 10% of your budget for waste disposal if you can support this business, and then, you can offer some incentives to consumers to send it in, things like that. But like following the money, right? Who has the most pain and money in this situation? Oftentimes it's the governments that are spending to ship and sort and deal with all this stuff. And there may be a way to get a grant or get them to participate in
Yeah.
the operation of this kind of company.
I think, yeah, we can speculate on this a lot when it comes to the pricing. I think we're going to need to leave that as an action step for the listener to do some more research on how much value there is left in the waste streams. I think it'd be useful for us to think about this opportunity going forward as if purely from a financial perspective, it may not pencil out. So we need to think creatively about other ways in which we can make it attractive to do this. But that's okay. That'll be a constraint there. One of the risks or the competitors that come to mind for an idea like this would be someone like Apple itself. I know Apple offers a recycling program, and it would be a net benefit for the world if they started taking AirPods and recycling them. But that's an existential risk to a company if you're specializing in AirPods recycling, because surely Apple would be able to do that better than you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's amazing then, since then they have recycled AirPods. So it cannot be all about the money, I guess. But
Sure.
I think there are I think Best Buys has things you can collect outside. But it's coming back to this again, I think Apple has a recycling program, and Best Buy has these bins which you can throw in any type of recycling. And I think Dell has a similar program where you can hand in any type of computer. But I mean, if a thing like this can be as a bee that stings them to get people to wake up and do according to the responsibility. I mean, if you sell a bunch of AirPods, let's say that they have sold 2 million AirPods, and it's been all over the news that they are impossible to recycling, and even though they continue selling them, I think they should be ashamed of themselves, honestly. With that much EBITDA quarter after quarter, not doing a proper thing to make them easy to recycle or easy to de-assembly and exchange. I had a few, now I'm wearing wired ones, but I had a few some time back, and then suddenly the left one stopped to work, and it was just like, yeah, throw it away. I'm like, send me another battery. I'm sure there's the battery. Can't you send me a battery? I can use a little screwdriver and like insert the other one. It was just impossible to get them into that part. So I mean, if Apple is, or all of these hardware owners, or the one who owns the brick and mortar stores of electronic change are obviously the at risk here as competitors. But I mean, that would be great. On the other hand, people are getting more and more, especially during this pandemic, are getting more and more interesting in buying things online. And then obviously, to some extent, and I'm sure you have experienced it yourself, when you're buying more and more online, you also come into the problem that you get a lot of things which you have to take pride into recycling. So it can also be a opportunity there, hopefully. I'm always turning to the opportunity.
Yeah.
I saw that you wanted to chat about the risk, Chris. It's so much more fun to speak about the opportunities than the risks.
Sure. That's what gets you hooked.
Exactly.
I have used the Best Buy recycling program. That's where I currently take my stuff.
And you do? How does it work?
They have bins out front in between the double doors of the entrance, and yeah, you can just drop it off directly in there. I think there are some limitations in terms of the total amount that you can bring in and the type of materials. And obviously during a pandemic, not as many people are going there. So there's certainly the online shopping aspect. And then
what is happening with it afterwards? Are you
that's
aware?
That's a question that I'd pose to the listener as find out
directly to landfill.
Right. Well, I imagine that Best Buy has information on their website about what happens to it and why they're doing it. And that would be a mini research project for the listener as an action step. Find out why Best Buy is doing this, whether they're making any amount of money on it, or whether they may consider it a marketing expense to get people into the door.
Yeah, that can
And
also
it looks like you're muted.
There is a movie, I forget the name of it, but I think if you look it up, you can find it. There's a woman who takes it upon herself to go and see where her trash and recycling go, um, ultimately, and she's sort of devastated to find out. So she spends all this time like cleaning out the peanut butter jar, so that it's
Yeah.
like perfect, and putting it in recycling and all this stuff. And she goes all the way to the sort of end of the line, and they take all the recycling stuff and they dump it right back in all the trash stuff. Why did I even watch that thing out? So yeah, it's useful and informative
I heard that this washing thing that people do, my mother-in-law does this as well. It's totally useless. You don't have to do that. They clean it with like hot water with plastics as one example before they start cleaning it.
I think that depends on the processor, because I have also heard here that if there is one unwashed peanut butter jar in the midst of otherwise clean recycling, at a certain percentage of dirty recycling, they just throw it all away.
This could also be a brown M&M tactic. Are you familiar with the brown M&M?
I am not, but I would be happy to be enlightened though.
So I think it's in the, I don't have the primary source on it, but I think it's in the Kiss autobiography or something like that. And they would ask when they would go to, they have a rider when you're musician and band that's really famous. You request all of these things on your rider. Oh, I want this hotel suite. I want these things in the refrigerator, and I want a massage person to show up, whatever. And they would put on their list that they wanted. I think it was like a rainbow colored M&M, a jar of them, but all the brown M&Ms removed or something like that, right? Like something very specific. And of course, from the outside perspective, it's like, oh, these decadent artists, they just kind of like want to make people do stuff and make things really difficult. And I don't even want brown M&Ms. And then within the book, it's revealed that, it was all about testing to see whether they were paying attention. And they knew that if they didn't pay attention to the brown M&Ms, there's probably something else that was going to go wrong that was actually important, with the show and the setup and everything. And then they would look to sort of deal with it. And so this, again, it's useful to research into details, especially from what I've seen in terms of the waste stream. They could be doing something like this just to keep people vigilant on some other, maybe it's not about that it's cleaning out, but the fact that you separated it. But by asking you to do something as specific as cleaning it out and telling you you're going to get fined for this or whatever, they're sort of making the community do the right thing with a kind of
sure.
Yeah.
Have you guys been to like large landfills?
No.
When I was a kid, they took us, which I think was a good thing. When I was a kid, they took us on a field trip. That's the last time I've been to a large landfill.
Yeah. I was actually a few years back with one of our customers. And the thing that one is that it stinks really, as you can imagine, a landfill. And then it was like a mountain of just things. And they had like trucks driving around and it's coming things. But the thing that strikes me the most, it was actually small fires at all times. So there were things burning, and that can't be a good thing at a landfill where things who's that mixed up are burning. It must leave like it must be like so bad for the atmosphere, just straight up where the landfills are for all of this. It was just like, and I asked the site manager why is the fire there? It's like it's popping out there, and then it pops out there. It starts somehow. It gets hot, or it gets like something with the degradation process. Things can start like I don't know. Could
It's
be
very
the blend.
When things are breaking down.
Yeah, that was very, very scary. So you were walking around there, and then there was a fire, and then eventually there was a tire, and then there was another fire, and there was a lot of like different things. So you should bring your kids there. Do the same thing as they did with you, and just walk around, wear a mask.
Yeah.
I want to take a slightly different angle on this in the time that we have left. Focus on maybe chipping away at this problem. We hinted at it with just focusing on the power cords, for example. But I think when I think about what is the 80-20 of this, what's the minimal behavior you can take in order to get people to change their actions and recycle more of the electronics, right? And if we broaden the question to that, there are people who aren't as conscious as we are about even segregating electronic waste. They just don't want to think about it and throw it right in the trash. I wonder if there is a more humble business opportunity to help shift some of those behaviors, and maybe it's a bolt-on program for trash collection companies, right, where they have a little a dolly that they carry along in the back, where you can throw your electronic waste into that, or you have a separate bin, and that way it's minimal change to their behavior. And I realize that's almost a completely different idea from what we're talking about. But any thoughts on other ways, or expand on what I just shared there? Other ways to shift behavior for people who may not be currently thinking about it?
I mean, if we speak about behaviors a little bit, I spent a significant time reading books about behaviors just to try to understand why we act as we act. And the strongest one is positive reinforcement and sharing your things you're doing positively. Like I was saying to you guys that I was just out for a run. It's just about me bragging, but also giving positive reinforcement that I actually pushed myself, even though that I wasn't into any extent at all eager for a run today. So I think if you can give people doing recycling, and this must have been tried, but it's probably been tried on a very boring manner as governments and waste companies are doing. Maybe if you can give them something, maybe it's a good idea for let's say a local, where you guys are, a local recycling company. For every e-waste that's are delivered to the one, whatever it is, you get a recycled doll to bring back to your kids, and the kids gonna love that, and you're gonna bring it to kindergarten, and then you're gonna speak about it, and then you can, I don't know, make it something positive. Or just people, which everyone are now addicted to the phones. Maybe there is something you can do when you're actually doing it, and you can follow. And I think this is, okay, sorry, I'm losing sight here. I'm popping onto another idea, but I think a lot of people are like me in the sense of that they are actually nerds. They like to understand what happens with things. So maybe there's a journey here to be told about how recycling is actually. So there could be an educational journey maybe for people to understand, okay, I'm leaving this in, however I'm leaving it in. What is happening with it, and where does it end up? Are you guys giving blood?
Not recently, but have before.
No. So if you do that here in and also again related to Nordics, but then you're getting, after a few weeks, you are getting a text saying, now your blood has been used in something.
Oh, right.
And that's the best feeling. That's like the best SMS ever. It's better than marriage. You get so proud of doing that. And I think just sending out that text gets at least me, and I think there must be a lot of people get ticked by that box. Obviously booking themselves in a few years later, I think you can go every 6 weeks or something and leave blood again. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's something around that in terms of recycling, since just having these bins out obviously doesn't work, since the landfills are growing like mushrooms or I don't know, tomatoes in the sun.
So usually the one that takes us on Crazy Train. I've got a Crazy Train for today.
I like it.
Yeah. So electronics are electronics, so they have electronic components, and we're getting more and more sensors and little things that have detectors and sort of keys on them that you can identify them with. Maybe this is for tomorrow, tomorrow's technology recycling system, but what if you had some sort of identifier that was on every piece of electronics, that actually, when people threw it in the trash, it went through a sensor, and if it was detected, either you would get fined, right?
Yeah, or the other way around, rewarded,
or both. So if you put a certain amount of sensors. If we sense a certain amount of waste sensors in your trash, yeah, you'll get a little bit of bonus on your taxes. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that we can start to implement some sort of sensor technology to at least put in place something where people can be, even in your own trash can, right? You drop something in, boop, boop, doesn't go in there.
Yeah. Take it out.
Yeah, take it out.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Take it out. Yeah, and I know what is the growth rate of IoT in things? It's like 1,000% or something yearly. It's like gonna be in every component soon. So the fridge speaks to you, and I don't know, the shoes speaks to you, and everyone's gonna speak to you.
Chris, I think, but I don't know if that's.
I'm the tech nerd out of the duo here. Yeah, I mean, there's something to that, Ethan, because if you think about the contactless payments in your credit cards, right? There's no power going to your credit card, but it's an RFID chip that will hear the transceiver sending a message to it, and then it pings it back, so it knows. So yeah, I think that it's getting to the point where that's cheap enough to be able to do it. Again, I think about externalities, and in a broader, keep broadening this, but CO2 emissions tracking. There's an organization here in the United States. It's called Citizens Climate Lobby, I believe, and they're pushing toward legislation for a cap and trade type of system, which has been talked about forever. But something similar to that could make sense for electronic recycling.
Yeah. Is this train happening in every episode?
No, every once in a while, and it's usually
you just have to be special. Like, yeah,
sound like off the wall a little bit.
Yeah, I like the train episode.
One of Chris' crazy train ideas was like somehow it was like crowdsourced, writing of political, laws.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't think that was that crazy, honestly. I think Iceland did it. Another Nordic area country. They crowdsourced their legislation, their constitution. They rewrote the constitution.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Crowdsourcing, which, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine today's Americans crowdsourcing their constitution, but I think that there's potential for intelligent people to do something like that. So,
man,
we're getting all sorts of crazy change.
Crowdsource the constitution.
Yeah. I think Chris Wallace can bring that up with Mr. Trump. That would be amazing.
Yeah, if I ever get in front of him, I don't know that there would be a constructive conversation at this point.
Yeah.
Without getting too political here. Okay. Well, Anders, thank you so much. We're coming up on time here. We may not have answered all of the questions that we would raise to start this business, but we've certainly asked a lot that will get people thinking about this idea. And can you talk a little bit about how questions like this may have germinated in or led to a good company?
Yeah, so basically we started, and I think everyone starts the business out of, I guess, or it's only me that I'm stupid, but people that are true with themselves are starting the business to solve a problem they see for themselves or a fear they have for themselves. So we started a good company actually just for the reason, like 50 yards behind this wall where we have like 10 cows. So a few years back, they couldn't, due to it was so hot, they couldn't have the well dried out and the grass was burnt and so on and so forth. And I think, so the reason for us to, with all of this, was to see if we can figure out a better way to ship things. So that was the thing, since I've been doing e-commerce so long, and I know that there's a massive problem sending things, even though if you have a positive innovation with something, let's say that you have a positive sock, or you have a good product, but you typically send them all around in plastic and cardboard and so on. So that was like the original idea of a good company, to see, could we solve on a broader scale one of the major problems with e-commerce? Could we start sending things in at least a neutral manner? So I think we are, and that was also from my own panic. I was giving, like, once a week I have to take a truck, go down and just put away recycling, cardboard and plastic and so on and so forth. So I hope that a lot of people are thinking about these kind of things, which we are doing into some extent very automatically with our daily lives, and think about, could we change these behaviors? And that's what we are trying to, that's what I'm spending a lot of time on a good company. And a lot of these wild ideas are never going to turn into light, but some are actually quite okay. And then we are scaling and capitalizing on these. And the others must also be there, since otherwise you cannot, like, you cannot only find the winning ideas. You have to be wild and think about all of the major things.
Well, I was particularly inspired in reading your interview on Starter Story, which we can link to, that this isn't a small business that you started. You were doing 220,000 a month in revenue, at least at the time of that interview. So
yeah,
that
we're
has to
doing
be
a little better now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's amazing that you've taken an idea that's not only positive for the world and turned it into a very lucrative business. So hopefully that's inspiring to the listener out there. I'm sure that it is. If you are on board with this mission that Anders has laid out for us, to the listener, take some action, follow through on some of the steps that we've outlined, do some of the research that we've talked about, and email us at update@runwithit.fm. Tell us what you've done. Everyone who responds will gain exclusive access to a private Facebook group of action takers, and one lucky listener will earn a free mentoring session from Anders and potentially a business partnership on this new idea. He'd be a perfect person to work with on this idea, given his experience with a good company. He's obviously very passionate about it, and he's been quite successful. So it's a fantastic opportunity to the listener out there. Anders, thank you so much for the conversation. We've really enjoyed it. Where can people go to find out more about you?
They can go to agood.com. That's our major website, and they should especially read about our foundation, which is our most important thing, which we are doing, and the thing that I'm actually the most proud of. So the more we can grow, the more we can offset to our foundation. So that's the thing they should start reading to, and then they can experience the products and the other things that we are doing. So agood.com is a good place to start.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anders. Looking forward to hearing from the listener on the actions that they take forward and connecting with you down the line.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. It was a pleasure. It was the best hour in a few weeks.
Great. Glad to hear it. All right. Take care, Anders.
Thank you much.
Actually, if you can hold on.
Yeah.
Log
Sure. I'm holding on.
Okay, great.